read your thoughts. From the future.
The movies of
1985.
Hello. It is week 34 of the year 1985. That's Tuesday the 20th of August to Monday the 26th of August, 1985. My name is Jason Hutchins and I'm trapped in the past 40 years ago with nothing to do but watch random movies that I rent from a local video store, and I select those movies by spinning a bingo machine and seeing what number comes out. So let me do that right now. Oh, I think a number was just sitting right in there. Number 19 came out. So let me look up my spreadsheet and see which number that is. Number 19 is a movie called Out of Africa, which I think is Meryl Streep, isn't it? I've never seen it. I think Out of Africa is like a lot of movies that I've watched this year, in that I'm familiar with them because I would have seen trailers for them on VHS that we rented when I was with my family when I was 13 years old, but I never wanted to see them because they were for grown-ups. But now I am the grown-up. So look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to Video Focus in Victoria Park and I'm going to rent me Out of Africa on VHS. And while I do that, I'm going to flick on the TV and you can watch an ad.
Now what you gonna do when you get a snack attack? How'd you keep away from junk? How'd you keep them off your back? And when it's time to treat your belly, get off the beaten track. Time to find a new direction, time to down a snack pack. When the snack attack hits you got the facts. There's nothing does it to you like a snack pack. When the snack attack hits you know you got the facts. There's nothing does it to you like a snack pack.
If it wasn't for snack pack, give it stuff.
And let's just pause things before the movie begins and have a look at the cover that I've got in my hand. So, Out of Africa, this is a movie with Meryl Streep and Robert Redford, directed by Sidney Pollack, it says, and based on a true story. And we see Meryl Streep and Robert Redford on the cover in the middle of the country, sitting down on the grass, just staring into each other's eyes. And yes, it's going to be a bit of a romantic movie, I think. Now, Sidney Pollack is the director. I don't know too much about the movies that he's directed. When I think of Sidney Pollack, I think about his role in the movie of 1999 that we saw in last year's podcast, Eyes Wide Shut, the Stanley Kubrick movie. He was the guy with the big house that was involved in all sorts of shenanigans. Anyway, turning over to the back of the VHS, there's a photograph of Robert Redford doing the ice bucket challenge on Meryl Streep by the looks, pouring a whole bunch of water on her. And it says, winner of 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. Now that's at the 1986 Academy Awards, the Oscars. This magnificent story starring Meryl Streep and Robert Redford is a sweeping romantic tale based on the true life experience of Karen Blixen, or it's a Karen in Kenya, circa 1914, Kenya, where you get lions and tigers. Now, despite her disastrous marriage and the failure of her coffee plantation, Karen's passion for Africa never died. For not only had she fallen in love with the country, she was also madly in love, oh dear, with the maverick adventurer Dennis Finch Hatton. Out of Africa is a beautiful and moving account of her memories, a love letter written to the people and places she loved. So there you go, Out of Africa. I'm not sure I'm really looking forward to watching this one, but I think it's one of those movies that you've got to tick off your list. If you're doing the movies of 1985, it's certainly a landmark picture if it won so many awards. So I think it's time now to press play on tape and watch Out of Africa.
It's an odd feeling, farewell. Men go off to be tested for courage. And if we are tested at all, it's for patience, for doing without. And I'd always known that. life really so damn simple for you?
Perhaps I ask less of it than you do.
I don't believe that at all.
Next time you change your mind, you do it with your money.
They bought your title, Baronessa. They didn't buy me. You might have asked Dennis.
I did. She said yes.
Doesn't it matter to you that I'm another man's wife?
What matters to me is that you tried so hard.
And that you're alone now.
Lay your head back.
Through the eyes of a woman who wouldn't be owned.
Why is your freedom more important than mine?
It isn't. And I've never interfered with your freedom.
From the spirit of a man who couldn't be tamed.
When did you learn to fly?
Yesterday!
Out of a land of beauty, mystery, and majesty. Out of Africa.
Look, this movie's not too bad. I'm going to give it a 3.5. I'm not going to give it a Mintox though. I'm not going to make you go and watch it. The reason why it's not too bad is Meryl Streep. I think it really comes down to Meryl Streep. She's good in everything that she's in and just compelling to watch. So let me go through the first 20 minutes. We begin with the sunrise and we see old Meryl Streep asleep in her bed having a dream. And in her dream, you can see a man in a hat silhouetted against the sun. Now, she's dreaming of this man, Dennis, who she'll meet, or who she did meet in Africa. Now, later on, we see that she's now up and writing at her desk. She's an author, of course. This movie is based on a true story. It's Karen Blix or something. Anyway, she wrote the book Out of Africa based on her life. Anyway, we see her writing at her desk in snowy Denmark and narrating and talking about this man, Dennis, and then saying she's getting a bit ahead of herself. Let me tell you the story from the beginning. So it's looking back on her life, a bit like Titanic, I guess. So then we cut back to her past in Denmark, where she's at a hunting party and she's shooting at birds with two brothers that she knows, Bror and Hans, one of them her lover and one of them her friend. Now, they're twin brothers that are both played by the same actor, the Austrian actor Klaus Maria Brandauer. Now, one of their conversations, this is between her and Bror, her and Hans, the friend, not Bror, the lover. Now, one of the conversations is filmed against very bad green screen in a studio. So I'm guessing they must have had to film a scene that they'd forgotten to film when they were on location, or maybe the conditions weren't right for it. But it really stands out like a sore thumb. There's a second green screen moment later in the movie when they're flying in an aeroplane, her and Robert Redford, who is Dennis. This is the man silhouetted against the sun. Now, she narrates then over this snowy scene in Denmark that she had a farm in Africa, and we cut to a train driving across this barren African plain, and titles come up. Kenya, East Africa, 1913. Now, I think there were titles at the beginning. I can't remember the exact year, but you can see now we've gone back into the past and we get our typical 1985 title montage as the music swells and we watch the train travelling across the continent. Now, the train stops for Dennis. This is Robert Redford, because he's there to load some ivory, i.e. some elephant tusks, onto the train, and that's where they meet for the first time. And it turns out that Karen is moving to Africa, to Kenya, to start a dairy farm with Bror, whom she's going to marry. Now, Dennis leaves as the train moves on, and then she is greeted at the station by Farah, who calls her Sabu, which means white boss lady. Now, Farah is a faithful servant of many years and a foreman of what would become her coffee plantation and probably her greatest confidant when she's living in Africa. Now, it's important, this initial meeting, because the movie ends with her asking Farah to say her name. He always calls her white boss lady, which is Sabu. But right at the end, she asks him, say my name, and he replies, you are Karen, Sabu. So that's an important part of the movie, just things coming around. Now, she arrives and finds that Braw is drinking at the club, hasn't even met her at the station. Obviously, that's a marriage of convenience, or he's getting a lot of money from Karen's mum to enter this marriage. So there's no real love in it. Anyway, so Karen's wolfhound, her beloved wolfhound, greets her and they travel by rickshaw to the club, where she causes a great scene by entering. No women are allowed, you see. Now, again, this is something that circles around to the end of the movie, where the men at the club invite her in for a drink as she departs Africa for good. Anyway, so she ends up going inside up to her rooms, since she's not allowed in the bar, where Braw greets her. Now, he has no ring. He said, I haven't got a ring. And the wedding begins in 1 hour. So she rushes to get changed. Someone starts playing the wedding march on bagpipes. And when she actually is married, the man who, like, everyone's dressed by like British colonialists in their hats and everything. Obviously, this is a movie that's looking at colonialism through rose-tinted glasses, with all of these happy servants and no racism to be seen. Anyway, they do get married. The man marrying them doesn't know Karen's name. She's Baroness Karen Blixford, or whatever it is now. She mingles around after the marriage, but doesn't really have any friends there, doesn't make many friendships. And she goes upstairs and finds that the tusks have been put into a room there, a room containing a lot of books. And there she meets a man called Berkeley Cole, who's a business partner of Dennis, whom she, of course, is going to have an affair with. Now, Berkeley Cole is played by Michael Kitchen, whom you might know from Foyle's War, amongst other things. Now, Farah eventually comes to get her, and they travel the 2 hours in the darkness to her new house, where she has dinner with Braw. Braw introduces her to all of her new staff, and around the dinner table, Braw confides in her that, no, we're not going to start a dairy. We're going to grow coffee instead. And she gets a bit mad because her mother put up all the money to start a dairy. And she ends up calling him her lover's brother. So maybe I got it the wrong way around. Maybe Braw was the friend and Hans was the lover. It's not really revealed too much. He violently grabs her and says, be very careful, and then kisses her in a fairly sort of paternalistic way, I guess you'd say. And that's the first 20 minutes. So that sets things up. Obviously, the movie's quite long. It's 2 hours and 34 minutes or something like that. And like I said, it is looking at colonialism through rose-tinted glasses. Now, Out of Africa swept the Academy Awards in 1986. It got 11 nominations. So did The Colour Purple, which is another one of these rose-tinted movies that we have already seen this year. They both had 11 nominations. However, The Colour Purple won 0, and Out of Africa secured 7 awards out of those 11 nominations. Now, Karen Blixen wrote her memoir, Out of Africa, under the pen name of Isaac Dinesen, who is credited, that pen name is credited in this movie's credits. So it's an adaptation of a memoir. Now, when I heard the title Out of Africa, I always thought that it was named after this hypothesis of human evolution, that humans emerged out of Africa, but it's the other way around. This hypothesis was coined was proposed by three researchers, Alan Wilson, Rebecca Cann, and Mark Stoneking, in the year 1987, so in 2 more years from now. Now, these three scientists did choose the name Out of Africa because of the cultural resonance of this movie and the book that it's based on. However, Karen Blixen's memoir, her book, Out of Africa, was based, the title for that came from the title of a poem she wrote in 1915 called Ex Africa. And that poem, in turn, was named after a Latin proverb, Ex Africa semper aliquid novi, which translates to out of Africa, always something new. So that's really the full coinage, I guess. So the book was published in 1937, and 18 years after she made her journey home from Kenya. Now, some interesting anecdotes about Meryl Streep's performance. They didn't really want her in the movie. They felt that she didn't have the looks for it, but she's certainly got the acting chops for it, and I think she was the right choice. It's quite a memorable role. Now, one of the scenes that she shot was a very long, continuous shot where she had to make conversation with a whole bunch of different people. Now, it turns out that right at the beginning, when the director called action, a huge beetle crawled down the neck of her jacket and inside against her skin. She remained completely composed, did not break character until the director yelled cut, the director Sidney Pollack, of course, and then she just ripped off the jacket and yelled, "Get this thing off me." So that's just evidence of her composure when she's playing a character. It's crazy. She also had to fight off a lion. Now this was a planned scene, of course. There was a lion. She was told that the lion would be restrained. It would be on a leash. It would be tethered. And she had to fight it off with a whip. Now, it turned out that it wasn't tethered. That it had no restraints whatsoever. And so the visible, that's just my dog shaking itself off, if you can hear that. He's just had a knee reconstruction, poor thing. Anyway, the look of terror visible on Meryl Streep's face was completely genuine. She was fighting an unrestrained lion with a whip. Now, Robert Redford was supposed to play a very British aristocrat, and during filming, he did put on a British accent, but the director, Sidney Pollack, hated it. So they overdubbed everything with his natural American accent, fearing that audiences would find it distracting, which they probably would have, but it's not as authentic for that reason. Meryl Streep, of course, nails this Danish accent. She listened to recordings of the real Karen Blixen giving lectures and things like that, or reading her books aloud. And that's typical Meryl Streep, isn't it? She goes deep into character. Now, what I found really weird and disturbing about this movie is that it did not acknowledge the existence of the Ethiopian famine. Now, they were scouting for locations in 1984, which was before the West really found out about what was happening in Ethiopia. It was this article published by a BBC journalist in late 1984, I think, that blew the scandal wide open. But they were filming, they started filming in Africa in January 1985, and while all of this stuff was going on, and there's nothing in the titles of the movie to acknowledge what was happening in Ethiopia, even though Kenya borders Ethiopia, and the distance between the capital city of Kenya and the capital city of Ethiopia is only about 2,000 kilometers. It's like traveling from Perth up to Broome or something like that. Which is, I just couldn't stop thinking about it, given how much news I've read about Ethiopia in 1985. The fact that none of the actors or the director or any of the producers or anything like that, none of them are on the record ever saying anything about what was going on in Ethiopia. So, sorry, it was the BBC's October 1984 report called Biblical Famine that blew the lid open, and then, of course, Band Aid and Live Aid and everything like that. We Are the World was recorded and was number one while Out of Africa was being filmed, which is insane, isn't it? So, you know, they were filming this $31 million movie on location while 500,000 Ethiopians died of starvation. And they didn't say anything, and they didn't put anything in the titles. Unthinkable, really, that would be the case. So I wonder why. There's no information as to why they chose not to say anything, but it is a massive oversight, even in documentaries that were filmed many years after the fact. There was a 2000 documentary called A Song of Africa, which was all about the movie and all about Streep's performance, and had lots of interviews and commentary, and they didn't mention a thing in that either. So I just find that very striking. Anyway, that's enough of Out of Africa. Like I said, 3.5 stars. Not a Mintox, but not Cactus either. Anyway, but now.
I'm driving along and I'm just singing my song. I'm in a news-free zone.
Well, welcome everyone to the News-Free Zone. It's that time of the week when we look back at the news from 40 years ago, so we don't have to look at what's happening in the world today. Now, the first article this week is from Australia, and adventurer Hans-Peter Beck. He completed a 51-day unicycle journey across the Australian continent, arriving in Melbourne to national acclaim. They should have had a unicycle in Out of Africa, shouldn't they? On the same day, the Reagan administration started secretly shipping 96 TOW missiles from Israel to Iran, which was the first covert transaction in what would become known as the Iran-Contra scandal. Also, this week in 1985, Microsoft and IBM signed a pivotal joint development agreement for future operating systems. IBM would build the hardware, Microsoft would make the operating systems, which led to the dominance of Windows and Microsoft's dominance in PCs in general, reshaping the tech industry right up until today. Now, some other news from Australia is a Royal Commission declared there was no link between Agent Orange exposure and Vietnam vets' health problems, which devastated thousands of servicemen and their families. Now, one thing I've said throughout the year is there are so many air disasters in 1985. You wouldn't want to hop on a plane when you look at the number of air disasters. Many, like even every week. Now, this week, British Air Tours Flight 28M caught fire during takeoff at Manchester Airport, killing 55 people, which is awful. In movies, Hollywood's introduced the movie Teen Wolf, which had been filmed way before Back to the Future, but they released it to capitalize on Michael J. Fox's stardom in Back to the Future, and it went straight to number 2. So Michael J. Fox was the only actor to have 2 different films in the 2 top box office slots simultaneously. Also, what happened in America is Yugoslavia introduced the cheapest car in US history, the Yugo GV, which went on sale for under $4,000, $3,990, bringing car ownership to the masses, or at least that was the marketing spin, but it was spectacularly unreliable, spawning countless jokes. And apparently even a murder mystery comedy film features the Yugo GV prominently. I think it was in quite a few movies and TV shows due to its looks. Another air disaster in Maine this week killed all 8 people aboard. It was a Bar Harbor Airlines Flight 1808, but it was well known because it killed a small girl, a 13-year-old girl named Samantha Smith. Now, she was known as America's youngest ambassador and had become an international symbol of peace, a little bit like Greta Thunberg these days, because in 1982, she had written a letter to Soviet leader Yuri Andropov asking if he was going to start a nuclear war. Obviously, if you were young in the 80s, you were just petrified of nuclear war all the time. Now, her letter received an invitation to visit the Soviet Union, and that made her a celebrity on both sides of the Iron Curtain. With Soviet citizens mourned her death alongside Americans, with Mikhail Gorbachev calling her America's ambassador of peace. And she had a diamond, an asteroid, a ship, a mountain, all in the former Soviet Union, named after her, and they issued stamps with her likeness on it, all sorts of things like that. It's a name that's been lost in 2025, hasn't it? But it was a big deal in 1985. Now, also this week in 1985, so we've talked famine, we've talked the Cold War, and we're now going to talk about AIDS. So it was a pretty dismal time, wasn't it? So in 1985, Ryan White, he was a teenage haemophiliac who had contracted the AIDS virus through blood transfusions, and he was banned from attending school, just showing how people treated AIDS back then. So he had to attend school via telephone, so on dial-up, a bit like people zooming into lessons during the coronavirus pandemic, isn't it? So he exhibited a lot of courage, continuing with his education, even though all of these people were quite opposed to being around AIDS patients, which is awful, isn't it? Anyway, I'm going to leave things there for this week. I've got no Peeps news. I've got no Usenet news. I'm very sorry about that. But when I do check Usenet, it's all about the Amiga, and it's all about Back to the Future. And they're talking about things that we've covered before. So I'm going to try and find some interesting little known news from Usenet for the coming week. Please tune in next week and I'll try and have some news for you then. But until then, please don't forget to rewind.